So let's get started. I'm Liz Arrington, and I'm your fearless moderator for today. And I'm also the co-founder and the managing director of the GCV Institute. And I'm the architect of our Keystone CVC benchmarking platform that I'll share a little bit of today. This webinar is going to explore the challenges around defining measurable strategic insights, and we'll look at some impactful and programmatic approaches to key stakeholder communications. We have a stellar panel made up of representatives of two luminary CVC programs, MSD or Merck in the US Global Health Innovation Fund, and In-Q-Tel, both of whom will share their approaches for delivering insights that really matter. And I will ask the two Daves to introduce themselves in a couple of minutes after I quickly run through some Keystone data and set some context. So data gathered through our annual benchmarking survey and platform shows that most CVCs have a mandate to find transformative ideas, whether it's looking to create new businesses, to prepare for future disruptions, or in some cases to inform innovation strategy and product roadmaps for existing businesses. And although strategic impact is the raison d'etre for most CVCs, responsibility for delivering commercial results is shared with the parent corporation, which makes it difficult to define, to track, and to communicate performance. Therefore, our data shows that the ability to communicate insights and to provide advice on emerging technologies, on emerging markets, business models, and competitive threats has consistently been rated the most important source of CVC strategic value. And we've heard consistently that effective analysis and storytelling are critical to insights delivery, but that value can be hard to measure. We see most CVCs look to track activity-based indicators, such as the number of startups that they've assessed, the number of briefing sessions they provided, the number of reports produced, and portfolio company parent attach rate, those sorts of things. But those KPIs don't really capture the true value of the insights or the strategic advice that a CVC can provide. And they're also unlikely to resonate in the way that a compelling narrative or an anecdotal portfolio company parent success story might. So over the next 45 minutes, we're going to explore topics such as what types of strategic insight are most valued, how are responsibilities for insights delivery and development and delivery shared across CVC teams, what are the most effective approaches for communicating insights to key stakeholders, as well as how do you measure the value of those insights. So we encourage you to think about your own questions and feel free to, and challenges that you're facing, and feel free to submit anything that you'd like to talk about through the Q&A function, and don't use the chat, please. Let's meet our panel, which is made up of two Daves. We have Dave Stevenson from Merck or MSD Global Health Innovation Fund, where he is Managing Director and Chief Operating Officer. And we have Dave Labosco, who is Chief Technology Architect from the illustrious In-Q-Tel program. So I'd like to start by asking each of our panelists to spend a little time introducing themselves and their programs. What are their personal roles and tenure, a little bit about the firm history and background and focus, and how big the program is. So gentlemen, I'll let you get started. Dave, you are on top on my screen, Dave Labosco. So why don't we let you go first?
Sounds good. Thanks, Liz. And I really appreciate you having me today for a great topic. So a little background on myself. So I've been in In-Q-Tel for about 11 years. I lead our technology part of the organization as Chief Technology Architect. And to give the brief background on In-Q-Tel, what I always like to say is In-Q-Tel is the trusted bridge between government, venture capital, and commercial startups. We make strategic investments to leverage global startup innovation for the national security mission, and we empower our partners to advance their capabilities, safeguard their missions, and stay ahead of emerging threats. So in my role as Chief Technology Architect, I lead our technical diligence team, and we work very closely with our investment team and vetting investments, but also in understanding what our government partner challenge is and trying to keep abreast of what the big tech and investment trends are, beyond our walls. Real quick on my background, I have an aerospace engineering background. Before In-Q-Tel, I used to build satellites for a living, so I kind of bring that space technology perspective to the conversation. And I guess the brief history on In-Q-Tel, we've been around since 1999, originally chartered by the CIA, but we now work with over a dozen different agencies across the intelligence community and Defense Department, as well as the governments of the UK and Australia. So, yeah.
And how many investments does In-Q-Tel make a year?
We do somewhere between 60 and 70 investments a year. I think our portfolio is over 800 now at this point.
Wow.
So very, very active investor. Yeah.
Hey, Dave Stevenson.
Hi, all. Really, really good to be part of this. So we don't do 600 to 800. I'll get to that in a second. So I'm Dave Stevenson. I am the COO and a founding partner at MSD's Global Health Innovation Fund. We are known as Merck inside the United States, MSD outside the United States. In case you're confused on the names, we have a few trademark issues that are legacy. But for today, I'll be MSD. So my background, I'm 15 years into the fund as a founding partner. My roots are actually in clinical development in pharma, built clinical systems early on in my career, and sort of accidentally found my way to venture through strategy roles. When we founded the fund about 15 years ago, it was really a strategic response for MSD. The company had just gone through a major issue with a product withdrawal, where suddenly it became clear that they didn't really control the data around their products anymore. And that healthcare data, beyond needing to have a more offensive game plan internally, also would be this really large industry that would shape how healthcare gets delivered. And so the fund was a response to that. And so what our role is we look for technologies, capabilities that can help MSD, I'll keep saying Merck accidentally. MSD and other pharma companies do a better job of discovering molecules, developing molecules, distributing molecules, supply chain, as well as providing access to those molecules, which really goes to the core mission of the company. MSD wants to provide innovative treatments to patients to solve major societal issues. But all of those supporting technologies are really utilities, ultimately, that MSD and other pharma companies would like to see scaled. And that's where we've come in. So we're a $600 million fund. We typically are a later stage investor. We will go early when it's on strategy. But the intent is really to grow and scale those innovative technologies to the point where a company like MSD of our scale can use it. And so we not only do venture investing, but we play upstream with private equity as well, where we'll write much larger checks with the intent of how do we scale these technologies. We do usually about 6 to 8 new investments a year. Our portfolio is about 50 companies right now. And we will go early stage. We are global in our remit. We have what we call idea studios in Asia as well as Europe, where those are doing earlier stage, because typically the companies we see there are earlier stage investments with the same idea of how do we start to accelerate their growth.
Great. So let's flip back to you quickly, Dave L. And can you provide a little bit of context on the role that that In-Q-Tel plays in serving your agency partners, and as well as what stages and at what point in a kind of a startup life cycle you typically get involved?
Yeah, so our core mission is really around national security impact. And the way we do that is through investing in startup companies to help solve technology challenges faced by our government partners. So we have a very close relationship with each of these agencies, and we even get, we call it a problem set each year from our government partners of the sort of technology areas they're looking for help with, which is sort of a starting point, kind of points in the right direction, but we're always sort of scanning the market as well of where the big tech innovations are happening from the venture-backed startup world that sometimes the government may not be tracking yet. They don't realize there's a need for that or a capability out there. But through our investments, we kind of consider it as a directed investment where we invest in the company, but also ask them to develop an enhanced version of their product that better suits the needs of our government partner. And over the course of we call it a work program, a certain period of time, 12 to 18 months, they deliver an enhanced version with feedback from both our tech team as well as our government partners on that new version of the product. And hopefully, at the end of the day, if that product is leveraged and provides mission impact, that's kind of really what we grade ourselves on, is that sort of national security impact. And we're a nonprofit organization, so it's really making sure that we're serving the mission and trying to enable our partners to solve those challenges. And then you also asked about sort of what stage we get involved in. We're really stage agnostic. We'll come in at seed stage and even later, Series B, Series C, and beyond, depending on what the need is and what the technology is. We're usually a much smaller investor in terms of dollars invested. Kind of by design, we're trying to leverage the other investment, commercial investment that's happening anyway. So we're anywhere from as low as $250K per check up to about $3 million per transaction, but really trying to leverage the additional investment and kind of give a slight nudge that might help that product be used by the government. And hopefully we're also adding value of things that the company needs anyways in their commercial roadmap that's also useful for their commercial endeavors.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. So looking at the kind of roles that your two programs play in serving corporate innovation strategy, what types of strategic insight and advice do you find that is most important or most valued by your corporate parent? And I think, Dave, in your case too, it will be helpful to speak to kind of how that has evolved from when you first got started to current day. So maybe we'll start with you. Yes,
So
Dave,
me being
sorry.
Dave S, right?
We need nicknames.
Okay. So so we have been on a journey, as Liz mentioned, I think. So as background, our focus is really on digital, right? It's supporting technologies that are largely digital in nature. And when we started 15 years ago, the pharma industry was on one side and digital was way on the other side, and they didn't really think about each other too much. And so for the first 5 years, we're kind of off on our own, setting strategy for the company, really trying to drive the technology towards a little bit where In-Q-Tel is, right? How do we provide fit for purpose technology back to the pharmaceutical industry, right? Where we are seeing interesting things in other industries. But that shifted about 5 years in, where suddenly everyone caught religion on digital. And so today we're tightly integrated with the business units. We spend a lot of time with our business partners. We spend a lot of time with their leadership teams, and really it's similar to where In-Q-Tel goes, right? I mean, they come to us with sort of the inside out, this is what we need and we'd like you to find it. And we come with the outside in of like, this is what we've seen and how we think it can apply to you. And in those discussions, we really set our investment strategies to try and drive the right scaling of technologies. And we are stage agnostic, which means we write very different check sizes. So for something that, MSD is committed to multi-year contracts and tens of millions of dollars in revenue for the portfolio companies, we'll write much larger checks and we'll go upstream with private equity. We'll write $20, $30 million checks. Traditional venture is more about, hey, we're just trying to scale something that needs to be a little more robust to serve the industry. And that's sort of a $5 million-ish check. But we will go early stage too, where it's, hey, this is an innovative technology. It plugs into the technology roadmap of our portfolio companies or of pharma companies. And we'll invest ahead of the curve. And those are smaller checks. Those are, $1 million, $2 million checks, with the idea that they have a much faster on-ramp because we know where they plug into the ecosystem.
So it sounds like a combination of application specific or use case specific insights, as well as forward looking.
Well, and I think the key to all of it is we really try and tie it back to motherhood and apple pie stuff for the pharmaceutical industry. Of end of the day, they want to find patients, right? Whether that's for their products that are on the market or for clinical development, they want to find better molecules. They want to find ways to be cost efficient in how they deliver those products through the pipeline. And so everything we do really ties back to those very high level themes of like, yeah, we found you patients. right? Or we found you a better molecule, or we found a way to save you X in how you deliver it.
Mhm, mhm. Okay. So what about InQtel? You know, what sorts of strategic insights have you found are most valuable and most impactful for
Yeah,
your agency audiences?
I think there's a few different areas. There's certainly the technical insights of, where's technology headed, making sure our government partners, stay current in where tech is headed, both from for them to be able to leverage it, but also just from a risk perspective of, if there's, threats or risks for national security, that they're aware of kind of how technology is being used globally. Um, I think that's certainly a big piece of it, and that matches with sort of the group that I lead, the technology architects, the technologists, and the team. But there's also, I think, very impactful insights around investment trends. Where is venture capital looking? Where are global investors looking to invest? And what are those dynamics that are happening there? And then just the geopolitical trends of if it's easier or harder to invest in certain areas, or certain countries are trying to invest in certain tech areas. That's, of course, very interesting for our partners. So I think it's a mix of all of those things, and comes through in the conversations and there's a lot of overlap between those three. So yeah, it's probably where I bucket them. There's probably more, but those are the kind of the big three ones that I think about.
Mhm. And so you have quite a substantial team at InQtel, both investors and deployers and your team and communications related. It would be really helpful to have you spend a minute just walking through kind of how the InQtel team is structured, and then what roles do the different groups play in delivering insights.
Sure. So kind of in our core deal part of the business, where we're investing in startups, we have a technical team and investment team that we work very closely together. And we talk to about 1,000 companies a year. We publish a meeting note in every one of those conversations, which is sort of the beginning of the insights process, of the awareness for our government partners of just, where are these companies? What are they doing? Why is it interesting? So that's, I'd say, sort of the starting point, kind of the top of the funnel. On the sort of technology interest side, we then narrow that down to a smaller group that we write up more detailed products on, and kind of have those conversations of would this be a fit for your government use case for capabilities, delivery for adoption of the technology. But I think there's also really at all those steps and through our diligence process and kind of mapping the landscape of what's happening around the world, sort of competitive landscape or investment landscape, there's other ways that we pull out those insights. So we have, I think when we were chatting a couple of days ago, we talked about, we do have a kind of a more formal insights team that's embedded with the rest of our team, working with the technologists and the investment team, to kind of help us think through, how would you explain this to a non-technical expert, kind of up level, so someone kind of take away those key points. And then through our actual projects, the work programs that we fund, we also have a program management team and a project engineering team that's helping kind of shepherd these companies through delivery of these new technologies. And I think they have a role in this as well, of sort of seeing what are the challenges companies face and kind of getting that product delivered. Supply chain risks that might be encountered of, oh, this key chip or this key software component is not available anymore, or there's export restrictions on either side of the world that's providing a challenge. So I think there's lots of different ways within the organization that we pull those insights out.
And your technology team and this insights team are full-time doing these roles, right?
They are, yeah. So full time, and we all wear sort of, I guess, a lot of hats within the organization of different steps in the deal process and different steps in sort of that insights process. And some of them are sort of more formal targeted projects. I think we also talked about, we do have these global competitive analysis projects and market surveys where it's a sort of a deep dive in a certain topic area, whether it's one aspect of AI or cybersecurity or autonomous vehicles, that we want to sort of summarize after we've talked to dozens of companies in the space and other investors, and kind of pull those perspectives together and kind of weave it through in terms of a presentation or some other sort of product that we share with our partners to kind of help educate them.
Okay, well, we can talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but it's helpful to just kind of get the frame that InQtel is lucky that you have a much more robust team than many CVCs would have with dedicated people playing these roles. But I think in many ways, this is kind of a good best in class example. So Dave, you guys operate on a much leaner basis with people wearing multiple hats, although you in particular wear a tremendous number of hats. But talk a little bit about how the MSD team is organized and what roles, the different functions play in collecting and delivering insights.
Sure. So yeah, we are a little leaner than that. We are, I would say, very jealous of where In-Q-Tel is and could do a lot more with a lot more resources. So we have 10 on our team, covering a global 70,000 person organization. And because of that, we're pretty thoughtful about how we maximize our return on hours. And this is going to come across as perhaps cold, but we really try and focus on who are the people that really matter within MSD, right? There's an insatiable thirst and curiosity. I mean, it's a highly intellectual and curious organization, right? We have a lot of scientists. People are genuinely curious about the world. So there's no shortage of demand on our time. And so we are very careful about, we tend not to publicize broadly what we see in the world. We tend to try and target our communications more specifically to the directors, senior directors, executive directors. And really, I mean, end of the day, unless there's a VP who cares about it, it's hard for us to spend a lot of time there. It's more like consulting, right? Where we have a VP that doesn't care, we're trying to build support underneath with the Ds and EDs. Where you do have a VP, things run really smoothly and we're embedded in their leadership teams. We routinely meet with the business. We spend a lot of time bringing our views in, but then also listening to what they have to say in terms of who they've found. But I think what it comes down to is whatever your resource is, it's just being very conscious of who are your different audiences. Because it's not to say that we don't communicate to the masses. We do. We just do it selectively. And we tend to try and let the business leaders do that themselves. So like just jumping ahead a little bit in some of the conversation probably, but we try to make the business leaders the hero, right? I mean, no story that gets released within MSD is, GHI leads whatever. It's, supply chain leader X, right? And talking about how they worked with this portfolio company and they had this result. And that really helps reinforce the value back, right? You have the business leader talking about it, about why it's important. And that creates much more demand from those other VPs who maybe were a little standoffish to start with when they see another VP on the employee broadcast talking about whatever it is they delivered. So we do find it's a way to incent sort of that quid pro quo of like, yeah, I'll give you my time if you can deliver value for us.
And the entire Merck organization, you said, is mapped out and covered by different members of your.
Yeah, so so I should probably get more specific about that. So my role specifically as COO is basically everything no one else wants to do. So I have finance, I have operations, I have all of our communications and marketing, external outreach, plus compliance and everything else. And oh, by the way, I do investments too. But each of our managing directors is really tagged to a business function. And so each of those individuals meets directly with the leadership teams of those business units to really have that tight sort of line of communication and understanding of the business. And then beyond that, we have, a staff of junior people that sort of cross those functions where needed to fill in manpower. And then we have a portfolio success function, which is really critical to our success. But that function really looks at when our portfolio companies partner with MSD, how can we make sure that both parties are doing what they're supposed to do? So program management function. It's, they're not involved in the negotiations, but it's really, is each party doing what they're supposed to do so we can deliver the value that both parties want to get out of it. It is a critical function. And then part of that is also communicating the value back out, right? So every program is set up with expected metrics and tracked along the way. And as we achieve those results, that absolutely gets communicated back up through leadership in those success stories.
And you as the COO owns not only the communication of the financial results, and you actually report up through the CFO, right?
That is correct.
And have done, you've returned your evergreen fund 4 times over, is it?
No, not yet.
Not yet.
We're twice turned over
Twice. Okay. Yeah.
in 15 years,
Yeah.
working towards number 3.
Yeah. Okay. But then you also are responsible for packaging all of the communications around the strategic performance and
Yeah, exactly. So it's I have line of sight towards the front end of investment strategy, right? Of, that all flows through me of, when we balance how we're allocating our portfolio, where we invest, and then what we're getting out of it, all of that rolls through me.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about kind of the communications toolkit, particularly around insights, because that's one of the biggest challenges. Because as you said, Dave, you've got limited amounts of time. How do
Yep.
you get the biggest bang for your buck? And how can you leverage that for positioning the firm both internally and externally? So Dave L., you want to start by talking a little bit about, the portfolio of things that In-Q-Tel does?
Sure. I think there's a few different ways, and I think the variety of ways helps reach different audiences. So you have written products, which can be shared and have a lot of reach and can make it to a lot of different audiences, and they can sort of read it in their free time and, compare it to other things that they're seeing, public sources, reading, news media, things like that. We do a lot of meetings though as well, where we host roundtable discussions. We will host different kinds of convening events where we do a deep dive in a certain topic and have leaders in a certain technology area or from a certain market or investment perspective have a conversation or give briefings and kind of have that interchange with our government partners so they can ask questions and learn and get a more nuanced conversation. Again, with these presentations, we do these global competitive analysis products. We love to have those be in-person discussions, just because the conversation yields so much more insights, for lack of a better word, that the questions might lead us down a different path than we originally thought the government partner might care about. So we can kind of help tailor the product, so to speak, just in real time, kind of understanding what their need is. So I think it's the mix of sort of the pushing products out and to a broader audience, and they can kind of assume it how they want, to more of that in-person conversation where you can kind of help tailor your exact message to what they care most about.
Can you dig into in a little bit more detail the written products? I know that you said you produce, kind of these global technology market analysis reports, but what sorts of other things are you doing, and how frequently do you do each of these?
Yeah, it's a variety, and I don't know the exact numbers on it, but it's, shorter products and longer products. Might be if it's just, some interesting snippet of information that we want to share of, a new technology that's going to be important versus a deeper dive in sort of a deep technical area that requires that more nuanced view of, here's foundationally how this technology works. Here's some of the interesting, new entrants in the market, kind of the competitive landscape. Here's the challenges that they might encounter if we want to make sure that, we nurture this ecosystem so that, the government can leverage these technologies. Here's some things that might be considered. So it's a variety. I'd say there's sort of the short, medium, and long form of all those types of things that we look at.
How frequently do you do these large global?
Yeah, so those I'd say we probably do between 5 and 10 a year. So those are pretty significant efforts. Again, a tech lead and an investment lead working on those together. And it serves really two functions. Part of it's the insight and awareness for both our firm and for our government partners, but it also helps drive our investment strategy. So it educates us on making sure we know the market and can pick the best potential investments on behalf of our government partners.
Essentially, you're productizing your thesis development.
Yeah, yep,
Just,
definitely.
and another thing I've seen you do more of recently is kind of podcasts and videos and those sorts of things. Can you talk a little bit about how those have fed into your
Yeah,
portfolio?
definitely. So yeah, in addition to the kind of internal products that we share directly with our government partners, definitely the more public facing things on our website. Um, Part of it is just to kind of share more broadly, what we think are the important trends and kind of highlight, thought leadership to a certain extent and, raising the level for everyone of that. But it's a mix of, the blog posts, podcasts, some deeper, longer articles that either get published on our website or kind of in different publications that we link to. But it's a way to kind of make sure we have a voice in the public conversation around technology and kind of provide a different perspective on different topics.
And Dave, I know that that MSD is not resourced in the way that In-Q-Tel is to do this sort of work, but I remember from the very beginning of your program that it was built around your insights around healthcare ecosystem, and that that's kind of
No.
been fundamental both internally and externally to
Well, I think what's
anchoring your
important is
program.
I think what's important is trying to just acknowledge where you are in the life cycle of a fund. When we were a brand new fund and we were adjacent to, digital was very adjacent to what pharma was doing. Yeah, we spent a lot of time trying to educate. And so we wrote a lot of white papers. We spent a lot of time really trying to help them understand, hey, with the advent of mobility and edge computing, track and trace is going to profoundly change how cold chain works. You're a big vaccine manufacturer and you have oncology biologics that are all cold chain, might be important to you. And so, it's trying to lead them to water. And so, 15 years ago, we were writing a lot of white papers. Today, we're managing a lot of companies that do those types of things. And so the mission changes in terms of, how much are you trying to, prospectively look forward and say, hey, here's where the demand is going to lead. And then you get the reboot in the middle because everybody gets a reboot, right? I mean, you have a new leader or whatever. And so, true story. And when I use a prop, we used to use a matrix, right? Like everyone has. It's not real. This is a scratch piece of paper. And we had a new executive come in and say, this is great that you're tracking all these technologies. Why aren't you tracking any thing of the strategic around therapeutic areas? And we're like, how about now? Oh, I get it. Because we had been doing that all along. We were just talking about technology, not strategic. And so, those are simple things, right? But it's just trying to educate who your true audience is on, hey, how does this tie back to the business and how is it going to deliver value in the future? And when you get to steady state, which kind of is where we are now, it goes much smoother, right? Everybody kind of knows why we're here. Everybody knows specifically what we're working on as new things like quote unquote AI come up. And you get all these hard questions about, how is this all different and trying to reel them back into actually this is aligned with our strategy all along, right? There's nothing different. It's all aligned. But just trying to get people to take a breath and not get focused on what's the headline in the world. It's really what is the implication for you of these technologies? And is it truly transformational or is it, yeah, it's interesting, but it's not going to transform how whatever function is done.
Mhm, mhm.
Maybe if I can jump in to kind of piggyback on what Dave was talking about, it sort of brought up in my mind, one of the things that I worked on when I first joined In-Q-Tel was around commercial space technology. 10, 11 years ago, there weren't very many startups working on rockets or small satellites and, having a robust ecosystem, but we saw a few startups that were working in that area. So we did one of these global competitive analysis, market survey projects to say, hey, government, you might want to pay attention to this. It's not ready yet, but there's actually companies that are getting formed at a much lower cost, a different kind of risk profile that, as they come to fruition, these could be leveraged and, maybe be a more efficient way of getting satellites into space or doing remote sensing for certain use cases. So again, through the sort of insights angle, different ways of conveying that message versus with the in-person discussions, the briefings, the conversations, but also posting white papers and kind of things on the website where you can have sort of the public discourse, the more private conversations, and then doing some of our early investing to kind of help monitor these companies as they burn down the risk and got capabilities proven out. So I think it's a way to, if you have a thesis that you're trying to convey to your, for any kind of a strategic investor, to your corporate sponsor, the way of kind of educating and telling that story, different ways resonate better than others. So I think having a variety of options and kind of sticking with it over the years to kind of help move the ball forward. So.
And maybe one other thought in there is just not to underestimate the importance of herd mentality. Look, we all work in big corporations. For the most part, most people in big corporations are not huge risk takers. And so anything you can do to sort of communicate around de-risking an investment is critical. So we actually work quite a bit with our other pharma peers and other healthcare peers where we go in as co-investors, and it just helps to like make everyone feel a little more calm about like, oh, okay, everyone else sees value here too. But even, we've had great conversations with In-Q-Tel on supply chain over the years. And for my ability to go into our supply chain organization and say, this is how the defense industry is thinking about it, and here's how they see these technologies playing out, it carries a lot of weight. And so, the GCV community is really powerful when you can tap into it, because you do have peers who are looking at all the same stuff, and just being able to translate that back into your organization is a huge value add.
That's a really good point. And I think particularly when you have a team that runs a little bit leaner like the MSD team, then being able to tap these uh, ecosystem resources as well as what your own internal team is developing. Do you also rely on external market intelligence firms as well to support you in on
Well,
the insight side?
we do. I would say we selectively engage with consultancies or outside firms, and they provide interesting perspectives at times. We'll do either, our own targeted research, or we'll, pull stuff off the shelf. I think, the thing not to lose sight of is there's no shortage of consultancies. I'm a recovering consultant myself. Um, but they're in your boardrooms, in your executive suites all the time, trying to show their value of, hey, we understand what AI, how it's going to transform your whole world. And like, you kind of have to like reel back. Okay, I know that's what McKinsey or BCG or pick one said.
Yeah,
Let's actually talk through like where we see that truly happening, where there might be a real opportunity to have proprietary advantage versus you just want it to exist.
right, right. And as far as the way that the MSD team actually, delivers these insights, it sounds like part of it is in person through your enterprise coverage model where you're plugged into.
So I would say the most impactful, right,
Uh,
is the in-person. When you're in with the leadership teams in their routine business, that is the most impactful. There's nothing else that can replace it. That
mhm,
said, where you don't have that relationship, there are many, many other mechanisms you can use. And that's everything from, white papers to, doing a consultancy project with them, right, where we
mhm,
fund part of the consultancy project to look at this aspect for this business. We also have a pilot budget where we can, again, de-risk something for them of like, hey, we'll pay for the pilot or for half of the pilot. So there's tricks and tools you can use to try and get better engagement with the business. And look, once in a while you get a business head that is just not interested. that's okay too. Like just, move on. That's, you can
Right.
work with the people below and try and generate some interest, but it does happen. You just kind of have to, again, go back to like, where's my maximal return on hours for the team? If it's a dry well, it's okay.
And is there anything that you do to kind of programmatically communicate to the broader audience so that
I
your
wouldn't say
feed out?
programmatically. I would say it's selective. And a lot of that comes back to we have a phenomenal relationship with our corporate communications team.
Okay.
And so we know all the points there, and we just work with them on, hey, this would be a great opportunity for Sue or Joe or whatever, whoever the leader is, to, talk about how they've delivered value. Or, to put out the other thing not to lose sight of here is it's not just communicating within your organization, it's also outside your organization.
Right.
And so we do spend a lot of time trying to figure out how can we communicate MSD success stories outside through our portfolio companies, which obviously helps our portfolio companies, but also helps MSD in the broader
Right.
sense.
Right. 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 Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And
So,
yes, we have employee broadcasts, and when we get it asked to do those, we will happily do them.
okay.
But it's always the beware the unintended consequence of, whenever we do one of those employee broadcasts, we suddenly get inundated with, you know, 400, 500, hey, I've always wanted to be a venture capitalist. Can you find 10 minutes for me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
I'd love to, but that would be my entire year.
So how do you for those um investments or the activities in like in Singapore or in Germany and other parts of the world that are a little bit outside your historical strategy, how do you use those from an insights perspective?
Well, we really do it with the regional leadership teams,
Uh-huh.
right? So, I mean, we are tightly integrated with our Asia leadership team, and those communications activities largely happen within the Asia region,
Hmm.
as opposed to globally. The same thing with Europe. And we'll pick, there's conferences that are like health is a big conference. Health EU is a big European conference. So we'll focus those efforts in that community. But we really try and find the relevant audiences to make sure we're delivering the right messages.
Hmm. 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 And do you do any venture building at Merck at MSD at this point, and is that factored in at all?
We really don't. Historically, we have done some spin outs,
Uh-huh.
which is always a difficult topic, because it's usually somebody's turd that nobody wanted, and then you shine it up, and they're like, "Oh, it's shiny. We don't want to get rid of it." Um, those are not so fun. And we tend to try and be really quiet on communicating around those because inevitably there's a boomerang that comes somewhere.
Right. Right.
Again,
Right.
that's the perfectly candid answer. The politically correct answer would be like, of course we do.
Yeah. Okay. Moving on to one of the most challenging pieces of the strategic insights puzzle is how do you actually measure the value of the insights? Because some of the impact stuff you can take a crack at, although it's challenging because the parent has to play. But the insights piece, beyond kind of the activity base, we did so many reports or we did so many of this. How do you know that you're actually doing something that's valuable and how do you talk about it? So, Dave Stevenson, you want to start with that one?
Yeah, and I would bet that In-Q-Tel has a better story on this than I do. End of the day, look, we track everything. We have a lot of metrics. I've always been vocal, and it always comes down to anecdotes. Like you can have all the stats and figures you want, but like again, I work with scientists who are used to numbers and stats, and they all look at it. They just kind of like roll their eyes of like, yeah, okay, whatever. It's a bunch of activities. It really comes down to the hard, you know, we found a molecule. We found hundreds of patients for your clinical trial, which accelerated timeline 6 months. But it's the anecdote of we accelerated your trial. No one talks about the 100 patients or whatever it is, right? It's just the anecdote of accelerated trial. And that's where, it's when the business leader themselves is delivering that message, that's gold, right? I mean, that's what you want. Um, I think we do have, you know, it's a relationship game. And so I would say the wins are for us are somewhat the non-trackable stuff of our head of IT coming back and saying, 5 years ago, you guys were talking about generative AI. And, you know, now granted, this conversation happened 3 years ago, but like it's having that, relationship where they're like, hey, I really appreciated the heads up that stuff was coming. And that's where you have them, right? That they value you as a partner, that they seek you out for your advice, and that you provide something that consultancies or industry publications or others can't.
And I liked what you said in our call the other day about, how the senior executives respond to you.
Yeah, I mean, end of the day, if they pick up the phone or return your emails, you're doing a good job. They vote with their feet. If they're not responding or can't find the time for you, or it's like, oh, I'd love to see you. I have time in January. It's generally a sign that things aren't amazing.
Right. Right.
Um, so I think it's trying to, make sure that those relationships are as strong as they can be. And again, there's like a politically correct answer, and then like that's the very candid answer. I mean, the reality is, of course, you have to track everything. I'm not saying don't track stuff, right? You have to do the activity-based tracking. You have to make attempts at cycle time reductions or CO2 emissions or like whatever the value metric is. But it won't hold water if there's not that anecdote above it of like, well, why is that important?
And you report up through the CFO, I think.
We do, and I mean,
Do they care? Does he or she?
no, she does. So to give Caroline credit, like I have a very unique CFO. So we've been around 15 years. I've had three CFOs. The first one and the third one are highly strategic, remarkably strategic, and see huge value, not only in what we do, but how it's aligned to strategy, which is the key, right? So as she's making capital decisions for the organization of how to deploy capital, she sees the alignment of like, oh, right. So like we're investing here, but they're doing this, which is complementary and provides a better, right? So yeah, she's one of our biggest fans, which is great. End of the day, if your CFO is asking you numbers problems, you might have a bigger issue.
So Dave Labasco, I think InQtel's done some really interesting analysis looking at the value attributed to the strategic insights provided by the program. So could you talk a little bit about how your agency partners assess the value of the strategic insights and what works for you to communicate?
Sure. Yeah, and so it's honestly a similar story to what Dave talked about. We do have a lot of metrics. We track a lot on sort of the top of the funnel, how many companies we're talking to make sure we're having that source of those insights, how many investments we do each year. On the sort of capabilities delivery tracking, we call them pilots and adoptions. Does the government actually try out the enhanced product that's delivered? Do they adopt it, want to use it operationally, or buy more of it? That's the very easy quantitative thing to track. But the impact is much harder to track of, does this actually move the needle on how they do their business? Does it save lives or make the nation safer in some way? Is much harder to track. A lot of that happens through those stories. Sometimes we get the story, sometimes we don't. They just say, hey, this was a hugely impactful. We can't tell you how it saved lives or made us safer, but just know that it did. And similar with the insights, we definitely track a lot on our side. The government has ways of sort of tracking, do people kind of read these things, or do they give feedback? But at the end of the day, it's those conversations. One impactful story might outweigh 100 times something's read, right? So it's hard to balance those two, but I think it's the variety of, you've got it, like Dave said, you got to do the metrics to just measure, are you actually is the machine working that can kind of produce those insights and awareness? And then the sort of those qualitative stories as well of like, this is the type of thing that moves the needle for us. And, if you could do more of these things, it will really help us in the long run.
And I think that you have also taken kind of a higher level approach as well. Wasn't there an NPS sort of activity that factored in insights as one of the
I think we've played around with that a little bit, kind of in the team's interface, kind of on that part of the problem with our partners. I think the net promoter score and different approaches, sometimes it has value, sometimes you can kind of read too much into that kind of data. So it's sort of like the garbage in, garbage out kind of thing, or if you're actually getting the right people to review and fill out the surveys. But again, it's definitely do all those things. More data is better than no data. But it's just sort of trying to make sure you filter it and kind of don't over pivot based upon one negative review or one positive review. You've got to balance it with all the feedback you're getting.
right, right. But I think that what I'd understood was that the feedback that you would receive was that the insights piece was one of the very most important things.
It is, yeah, and that's certainly, I think, through both the feedback, sort of those survey type feedbacks and the conversations, especially at the more senior levels of government, kind of in the like agency director type roles that, aren't going to be the working level folks who use the new widget or the new AI tool, but they care about having insight of, oh, quantum computing is coming in so many years, or this new type of, bio capability or bio threat is emerging that we need to be aware of. So yeah, I think that's the different audiences is another piece of it too, of knowing who gets value from insights versus who gets value from sort of the core capabilities delivery.
Right, right. Well, I've been kind of winding in audience questions as we've gone, but here's one that's a little bit adjacent, but I think is interesting given what both of you have talked about. They ask when In-Q-Tel and MSD invest in a startup with strong strategic fit, how do you bridge the valley of death, the gap between a proven prototype and meaningful adoption within your partner organizations? Specifically, what processes, governance models, and cultural change tactics do you rely on to ensure that the technology is not only integrated, but also embraced by the people and teams who must use it? And I think you both have some interesting approaches for making that happen. So, Dave S., do you want to go first?
Sure. Let's be real here. I mean, we all, again, work in really big corporations where change can be really difficult. So I think part of it is, we tend to work with the areas of the organization that are more open to change at first anyway. And we rely on those success stories to permeate the rest of the organization to understand that, like, hey, if they want to get kudos for, moving things forward, they probably should be more open to it. So maybe starting there, look, the hardest part, honestly, is just getting off the ground, which is, we don't have budget, we don't have head count, we don't it's the resource poverty thing that you constantly get. It's an excuse, right? But we try and find ways to make as few excuses as possible, right? And so, and there's a bunch of ifs here. If the company has a product that is ready to deploy, in our view, in a pharma company, then we're there with budget, right? To say, hey, we will fund the pilot or half the pilot or whatever it is, right? And it's hugely powerful. It's not a lot of dollars, right? But it's hugely powerful because it takes that budget question out. And the reality is most people are off cycle, right? It wasn't on their radar. They didn't have it planned, and there's an immediate opportunity. They'd love to do it, but no money. So we take
Right.
that out, off the table. I would say the harder ones, and we do a lot of this, is we will, and this, it sounds like In-Q-Tel is very similar. We will invest well ahead of the company having capabilities that could serve an MSD. And that is really to have a seat at the table to, and we'll take 10, 15% stakes in some of these companies. We'll take board seats, but it's really to direct the company towards, hey, this is what your client base needs. It has to be robust, right? It has to be scaled, and trying to, put the capital behind it and leveraging, our balance sheet with others' money to drive that forward. And I would say we have a really strong track record of about 2/3, 70%-ish of our portfolio companies do wind up partnering with MSD along the way. But those are things that we do to try and ease that challenge of, in my industry, it's the rule of three. If a company hasn't worked with 3 other pharmas, they have a really hard time selling into them. And the problem is nobody wants to be 1, 2, or 3. So again, it's the herd mentality. And so once you've made it safe, right? Hey, they did 3 pilots with 3 pharmas and everybody had good results. It's easy then,
Right.
right? There's no risk in partnering with this company.
That
And
your
so those are the
insight,
types of things we do to try and make sure that it's easier. And then again, we have this portfolio success function, which I talked about, which also helps to smooth things just to make sure everything's running as it should.
right? But your insights are foundational to ensuring there is a value proposition.
Well, and it starts with the use case,
Yeah,
right?
right.
So it starts with the strategic need.
Yeah.
We build the use case with the business. Everybody understands what we're trying to do. Everybody understands why this company fits. So it's an integrated front end approach, trying to pull through that strategic value.
Okay. And I know InQtel is a quite sophisticated structure for making this all happen. You want to quickly speak to how that
Sure.
works?
Yeah, that's something that we pay a lot of attention to. And at a high level, I think one of the most important things that we do is whenever we do this directed investment, this work program, we have to have a government partner end user involved from the very beginning. So whatever requirements we're asking the company to add into their product, we have an end user who's ready to be a part of that conversation, come to the design review meetings, give feedback, and then committed to try it out, to pilot it in their use case, so that we have that real-time feedback. Now, there's still the uncertainty of, are their budgets, is it going to truly move the needle for them? Will they want to buy more of it in the long run? That's always harder. But the fact that they've been along for the ride from the beginning increases that likelihood for everyone moving down the road.
And you also, with each of your agency partners, have agreements that they will work with you. They'll commit resources, people,
Right.
funding,
Yeah, to be a part of the
participate.
InQtel
That's an
model,
upfront.
yeah, they have to have a certain amount of their staff, dedicated to work with InQtel to kind of be a part of that model and find end users and find those opportunities, which helps us quite a bit. And yeah, finding that right match is very important. So we'll spend a lot of time working with that, talking to end users, making sure that, we don't want to invest in something if it's not going to have that end use. But also to Dave's point, we do invest early. So we call it an equity only investment where there's no work program yet. But if it's an early stage company that we think may have some applicability down the road, we can do that investment, monitor its progress. We take board observer seats in all of our investments, so we can kind of track it and mitigate that risk until it's ready for a government partner to be involved in a work program.
Great, great. Okay, well, in our last minute, can I ask each of you to give me your thoughts on the one piece of advice that you would provide to a CVC team looking to make the most of strategic insights? So,
I'm happy to go
Dave,
first.
yeah, go ahead. Yeah,
Um, the thing I was thinking about is just be curious. So in all of your conversations, don't be afraid to ask a dumb question. I think as technology investors, we have a lot of breadth and we see different things from different perspectives. We can sometimes make connections that, someone who has their blinders on, just working on one tech area doesn't think to even ask. So by being curious, asking those questions, you might have an insight that, you could then share with your, corporate sponsor, your end user, and kind of pull a thread that might not be apparent to someone else.
and please,
I'm
yeah, go ahead.
smiling because I have a very similar answer. So I mean, when we hire into our team, one of the key things that we look for is someone who can connect the dots. It's that intellectual curiosity. It's the ability to say, I saw something here, there's a need over here, and I saw this other thing. Connect the dots and make that connection for your customer. And that's the key. Know your audience, right? And so it's those two things together, knowing your audience, knowing what are their fears, what are their limitations, what are the hurdles, how's the best way to communicate them, work with them. But then connecting the dots for them is such a valuable commodity. And the minute you demonstrate it, you have them hooked.
Yeah.
Now, don't get me wrong, if you lose money on your investments, you're out of business anyway, but so I should say that's an important part too, but those two key pieces on communication.
Right. Well, thank you both so much for generously sharing your insights and your experience and I think we had some really interesting nuggets and best practices that that the community can learn from, and we're
Well,
certainly
and maybe
looking forward.
one last
Yeah,
piece of advice, which is don't lose
yeah,
faith, right? I mean, it is a journey. None of us got here easily. It is constantly changing. It's very dynamic. But stay the course. If you truly believe in what you're trying to accomplish, you'll get there.
although not necessarily an easy road, but a worthwhile one.
True.
All right. Well, I'm going to spend a couple of quick minutes looking at what's coming next. And if you're interested in this topic or in others related to developing programs and teams for ensuring that your CVC is delivering and measuring and communicating value to your corporate parent, we would encourage you to consider sending a pod to our Institute Lending the Value of Corporate Venturing course and taking advantage of an opportunity to work on your own project with mentors from programs like MSD or like InQtel, both of whom have served as mentors for us. And we will also be offering our foundational CVC investment programs masterclass, both in person in Frankfurt, Tokyo, and Palo Alto, as well as live online. And for those of you who are interested in kind of more advanced investor modules, we've launched a CVC board member and board observer program that will be running in person in New York City in December and live online in November. And we have a busy calendar of events coming up at GCV, starting with our new GPLP Summit in the Bay Area at the end of August, as well as our Executive Leadership Forum, which will be hosted at City Ventures offices in October. And pack your bags if you're looking at exploring key CVC communities around the world. We have India and Houston in September, Atlanta, Brazil, and Germany in October, and Tokyo in November. And we set the date for our flagship Monterey event in March. And we will be shortly publishing our dates for London in June of 2026. So again, we thank you all for joining us. We love your feedback. So if you can take the survey, for those of you who've joined us live, that would be great. We will be archiving this video, and also Editorial will be publishing their summary of key findings and takeaways that will come out in the next couple of days. So keep your eyes on it. So we really hope you've enjoyed the discussion. And once again, thank you so much to our panelists. This was fabulous. And if you want to contact us about providing editorial insights, feel free to reach out to Maya Palmer. For professional development or CVC benchmarking, you can reach out to me. Or if you're interested in event partnership, please reach out to Helen Seidenberg. So again, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. We'll look forward to seeing you next month, where I think we'll be talking about secondaries. So thanks very much.